All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Dominic DeMaria. I'm an agent with Porcupine Real Estate, and we are here today as part of our Meet the Regions uh, series of videos. And today we are focusing in on the North Country. And I do apologize to anybody who was tuning in for the Upper Valley. That one's going to be rescheduled, but no need to fear. We will have it coming up relatively soon. Today I am joined by two residents of the North Country, Shauna and Drew. We can say hello.
Yeah.
And introduce yourself, guys.
Yeah, so my name is Shauna. This is Drew, my husband, and our son Ram. And we live in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. So that's pretty much the furthest north you can go in the North Country. Our town is about 802 people, so it's a very small town up north. And we moved to Pittsburgh just over a year ago. So we moved July last year. And prior to that, we were down south in Dover. And I'm sure we'll dive into the North Country and, why we're up here and why we moved up here. But that's pretty much who we are and, where we are right now.
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't realize how big the state is, it is relatively small as far as population goes. And the bottom corner of the state where I live down in Epping to Pittsburgh is, I think, 2.5 hours or
Three and a half.
3.5 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do I make the next slide? There we go. Okay. So, so again, we're looking at the North Country region here. So hopefully you can see it on your screen. And it's everything north of, what town did you guys say it was?
Jefferson, just about Jefferson is what I would say. Yeah.
And none of these are like hard, fast, like somebody might say it's this town or that town or whatever it might be, but we consider it everything north of Jefferson. So, and notable towns in that area would include
Berlin is like the biggest city, and that's relatively south of the North Country. Lancaster would be another notable town. Colebrook, Pittsburgh, and then there's smaller towns like Stewartstown, Clarksville, Whitefield, Littleton.
Yeah, for the most part, it's just a bunch of very, very small towns spread throughout the entire population of Coos County, which really encompasses the North Country as a whole, is I think around 32,000, which is smaller than the population of just Dover, New Hampshire.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
The three biggest places, like so the only real city with a mayor, etc., I believe, in the North Country is Berlin, which has roughly 10,000, I think slightly less, like 9,500 people. And Berlin, Lancaster, and Colebrook are the only places with more than 2,000 people in Coos County as a whole. So Lancaster, I think, slightly more than 2,000. Colebrook is just around 2,000 people.
So would that be what they say when they say like unincorporated towns and things like that? Is that what that means or no?
No, so I don't know if unincorporated towns necessarily are population based. So
okay.
Pittsburgh is one of the smaller towns in the North Country. It's an incorporated town, but it has only 800 residents. And then you have Errol, Milan, etc. So there are a lot of unincorporated towns. I think Dixville, for example, is one, but the population even of the majority of towns tends to be less than 1,000 for the most part, and the only places that have more than 2,000 are those three: Berlin, Lancaster, and Colebrook.
Gotcha. Okay. So why? Why did you guys decide that you wanted to move up to the North Country from Dover, which is a much more populated area?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go a little further back. So we actually escaped California, early COVID years. We had been thinking about moving to the East Coast for a little bit. I was walking my dog down the street in California, and a lady across the street yelled and called me a racist for not wearing a mask outside far more than 6 feet away from her. And so that was the day I gave my notice at our apartment building, and I told my husband, you have 30 days to get us out of this place. And we had already been thinking about moving to the East Coast, but we found the Free State Project on Facebook just by chance. We had already kind of thought about New Hampshire just because it is a relatively free state. It's very, very safe. We were thinking about having a family. It has, good schools and things like that. In New Hampshire, our position on schooling has since evolved. Very free in terms of gun rights. All those kinds of things kind of led us to New Hampshire. So what we decided to do was take a 3 or 4 day trip up to New Hampshire a week after I had put in our notice, and we found the Free State Project on Facebook, made sure that we were, ready to go to a bunch of events. We actually went to a North Country potluck while we were up here. And just meeting everybody in the Free State Project, both the Seacoast group, and then we met folks up in the North Country. We were completely sold, and 3 weeks later our bags were packed and we moved. And so we had to find something really, really quickly, and so we decided to rent an apartment in Dover. And we had explored the Seacoast area the most for the 3 or 4 days that we were in New Hampshire, and so we made a very quick decision to kind of rent an apartment in Dover, and then said, we'll explore the state while we're here, get our feet wet a little bit more, and then really decide where we want to settle down. And ultimately we chose the North Country because I think it's the place that aligns most with our values. My husband likes to call us conservatarians. So we're, a little bit more on the conservative leaning side of the libertarian spectrum. And I think the North Country really aligns with our values the most. And then also I think we just really, really loved the folks up in the North Country. We see our Free State friends up in the North Country, I don't know, 2-3 times a month. Chris and Jen, whose potluck we went to, actually are godparents to our son now.
Oh, wow.
And so, they're really like a big family, and we love everyone up here. And so it really just felt like the right move for us, because we really feel like everything just felt right, if that makes sense.
It does, absolutely. And so one thing that I always tell people when they move to New Hampshire or are thinking about it is, even if they're not libertarian leaning, most of the people you're going to meet here are very pleasant people. I very rarely find anybody who's just downright irate or unreasonable or has, a weird sensibility that I don't agree with. Or
Absolutely. It's funny because my husband and I were just talking about this a few days ago. In California, people live in kind of this echo chamber where if you have a viewpoint that's even slightly outside what the dominant belief is, that you are ostracized, that people don't like you, that you're a bad person, all the stuff. But we were just talking about this the other day, that in New Hampshire we have friends that are way right, super conservative. We have friends that are super liberal. We have friends that are somewhere in between. We have friends who are libertarian, somewhere in the middle in terms of the libertarian spectrum, and everybody kind of gets along, which is a fun thing about this state. And I think people are able to just kind of coexist harmoniously, which is also rare in the country right now. I think it's one of the least divisive states in that sense. And that's been really refreshing and awesome. People have been super nice and just very welcoming, and it's been great.
I find the same thing too. And I came from New York, which was a heavily blue state as well.
Yeah.
Pockets of conservatism all over the place. But I found that moving to a state that I consider purple, which is New Hampshire, it feels like there is room for discussion about a lot of those things. And it's not just cut and dry, oh, well, it's going to go this way every year. So, who cares? It doesn't make any difference what you think. It's whatever the bulk of people think. So,
absolutely. I think there isn't really that kind of tribal mentality in the state. And that's something that's been super refreshing to us. Like I said, we have friends on every every part of the spectrum, and people here have been so welcoming, and everybody is like open to having a discussion and a conversation. And even like up in the North Country, which has a relatively small population, you have quite a diversity in terms of thought, which is really awesome.
Yeah, and my wife and I, we ended up settling down here just because of what we do for work. It's just much more convenient for me as a real estate agent to be able to get to the majority of the state from where we live pretty quickly. And my wife is a cheesemaker, so like there's only three cheesemakers, like real, like established cheesemakers. So we had to kind of pick a place that was close to one of those places.
Yeah.
Or work in Vermont, and she didn't want to do that. So, but eventually we do want to move up to that area because I think it fits in
Yeah.
a lot more with our values as well. So,
Yeah.
Which brings us to culture and community. So I think a thing that pushes a lot of people away from North Country and the Upper Valley too, is the fact that they feel like there's not much to do up there, and I feel like that's a misconception. Maybe you guys can expand on that.
I guess it depends on what you like to do. If you're someone who needs a target within 10 minutes of your house, the North Country is probably not the right place for you. If you're like, if you like nightlife, the North Country is probably not the right place for you. But if you enjoy homesteading, if you enjoy going out in the woods and hiking, if you enjoy, the outdoors, camping, going on the lake, ice skating in the winter, snowmobiling, ATVing, all those kinds of things, then the North Country, there's tons of stuff to do in the North Country. And then the other thing I'll add to that is like, even though the North Country is, fairly remote, it depends where you are. If you're in Berlin, you have much more access to your regular conveniences than, let's say, if you were in Pittsburgh, like we are, where the closest Walmart is an hour and a half away from us. So we're not as close to those kinds of conveniences. So it does depend on where you are in the North Country, but I will say that the community is pretty tight knit, and so there are a lot of community things that happen. So the North Country Porcupines have a monthly potluck that we host together, and everybody gets together. We also have a monthly marketplace where we like buy and sell different things. People do like arts and crafts. People bring meat. There's all kinds of different things that happen at the marketplace, and then people just get together more frequently. So I think it's a lot more like community oriented. You're not going to get kind of the regular things that you think of in terms of going out and going to restaurants for brunch, or like going out at night, or those kinds of things. But there are a lot of like smaller community things. We do dinners with our friends a lot more frequently up here than we ever have before. People just kind of like getting together, and it's very family oriented place as well. So there's lots of things to do with kids. Our son is only 4 months old, but we love like just going out on walks with him. It's very, very safe. And every time you go out on a walk, you will see somebody that inevitably. And so it's a very different kind of place. I don't think there's nothing to do. There's lots of stuff to do. It just depends on what you like to do.
And you guys aren't like in a neighborhood either. So when you say you go out and you see people, I mean, that's saying something, because you're
Yeah.
not really close to your neighbors. So
our house is right in the village in Pittsburgh. So Pittsburgh is very, very like distributed. To give you a sense, Pittsburgh in terms of square mileage is as big as all 5 boroughs of New York City. But there are only 802 residents, like full-time residents. And so it is very spread out. But in the village, which is like just the main strip of Pittsburgh, there are like, 10, 15 houses in the village. And so it's more densely populated than the rest of Pittsburgh. And we do see people like we're like 2 minutes from the town office, and so we'll see someone like sitting out by the town office, or our chief of police lives like 3 doors down from us, and so we'll see our chief of police and say hi or whatever. It's that kind of
that's
place.
good to have that kind of relationship with the locals. Like, I mean, like
Yeah.
that there's that sense of like, hey, how you doing, neighbor? Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah.
Which, I think
And
people might not like, but a lot of people may like. So
yeah, and people really look out for each other too. You know, since we've moved up here, initially one of our concerns was like when we move up here, um, what if something happens with the house? Like, what if we need a plumber or an electrician or things like that? And there's like one electrician in like, you know, Pittsburgh Colebrook, which is like the broader Pittsburgh area, I guess. There's like one electrician, one plumber, but everybody kind of knows somebody. And once you get ingratiated in the community, it's really easy because people really do look out for each other. When I was pregnant, our neighbor, our next door neighbor, like literally anytime we would call, he would like drop anything he's doing and come up to our house to help us. He helped us set up the nursery, build the changing table, like all kinds of stuff. And our North Country porcupine friends came up and like did like a thing to like help us with baby stuff too. So people really are there for each other.
and I can't figure out how to go back on my slide, but the last one was about community and just events and things like that. So
Yeah.
using the FSP calendar, do people post all those different potlucks and gatherings on that? Or is that something that's more like a signal chat or something?
If I'm being completely honest, this is like my husband's domain. I am not the like planner and like the tracker of those things in our family. And unfortunately, he's putting the baby to sleep. There is a Telegram group in the North Country, and so the Telegram group is super reliable. And we have like everything that happens within the North Country Porcupines group goes on Telegram, and then there's also just, you know, ongoing like conversation between folks in the North Country. So that's a super reliable place. I know there's stuff on Facebook. I don't know how reliable that is. My husband's much better about that than I am. And I don't know if they're consistent about the FSB calendar, but I would hope so.
Yeah, I always see like North Country porcupine meetups
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
So I know at least those are on there, but I'm not sure about like if somebody's having like a dinner or a barbecue or
Yeah.
something. I don't know if that makes it onto the schedule.
We do a lot of like, so there is like the monthly potluck, there is the monthly marketplace. So those two are consistent, and then we have a lot of like informal get-togethers where we'll like do dinner together, or we'll do a game night together, or watch a movie at someone's house. And I don't know that those are like official North Country Porcupine events, but they're all like free staters who get together.
I'm
A lot
sure
of like informal gets together.
if you became a member of that community, you'd probably get invited to those groups
Yeah.
and you know
Yeah.
be able to
Yeah.
chat. It'd be easy
Yeah.
to coordinate.
Yeah.
So housing. When you guys were looking up in the North Country, how was the search and how did that all go?
Yeah, so we started looking for a place up in the North Country around around September 2021. And in 2021, I think it was the market was a little better in that there were more houses and much more affordable. We were in a very unique situation that we went under contract on for 9 months. And the seller kept extending that and extending that and extending that. And after 9 months, we got tired and we just kind of backed out of that. And so I think if we hadn't been under contract on that house for 9 months, we would have found something a lot sooner, and perhaps wouldn't have had as much of a tough time with the market, because by the time we backed out of that contract and started to look for other places, the market was not only much more sparse, but interest rates were much higher. Things were more expensive. And I think that's just kind of the trend in the state. We were very lucky to find a house in Pittsburgh that we love. And the previous owners, the husband was actually a builder. And so he kind of took this house down to the studs and rebuilt it impeccably. And so we were very, very lucky to find this house. It was at the top of our price range, but it was within our price range. And thankfully, I think when we met the owners, they just liked us. So they accepted our bid. Because
I definitely see a lot of houses, and when I saw the house that you guys chose and ended up moving
Yeah.
into, you made a really great choice. It's
Yeah.
absolutely beautiful. So
Yeah, we got lucky. And yeah, it was very competitive for sure. I think one of the other houses that Dominic showed us as well, we lost the bid on that house by $1,500 to give you a sense of how
terrible.
competitive it is. Like, and then there are also people who come up here and you know, they're buying vacation homes and they have a lot of money, and so they're able to put down cash. And we're a young couple, we certainly did not have cash to put down like that. So that's kind of what it is. I will say, like, I mean, I think this is true for most of the country right now, but the interest rates are super high. But it is what it is. We had great partners in Porcupine Real Estate. They really helped us a lot to find something and to make the finances work and all that kind of stuff. So very thankful in that regard.
And the rental market you may not know much about, because I mean you guys haven't really been in that market. Have you seen much for rent up in that area? I can't imagine there's a whole lot of housing that's not occupied up there.
Not too many developments or rental properties. Just I think partly because the population is so low and so sparse. I imagine that the possibility of renting is a lot more available in Berlin. But even Lancaster, Colebrook, you won't really see apartments. You will have like seasonal cabin rentals, but that is different. And those, of course, are far more expensive than the average apartment that you would rent, because they're specifically designed for vacationers to come when they are either if they're ATVing or snowmobiling or something like that.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that's a good suggestion for a lot of people too, which is if you're considering maybe living up there, if you are in the process of searching around, maybe looking into one of those rentals for a season and making home
Yeah.
base up there and kind of going around, seeing how the community is, and then really looking.
Another good way to do it is there are long-term Airbnbs, particularly in the Pittsburgh and Colebrook area, just because folks come up to ATV to snowmobile for the season. And so getting a long-term Airbnb might be another option in terms of like a rental for a period of time.
Yep, great. And then so we have a couple slides left here. We are coming to the end of our time, so I don't want to keep everybody too long here. But taxes and politics, we already kind of talked about the politics up there, how it's kind of more conservative, but there's still pockets of, I'm sure, other opinions up there as well.
Yeah.
How are the taxes up in the North Country?
It varies quite a bit by
Texas,
town.
It's actually shocking how much it does vary by town. Berlin, for example, I think is like number one or number two in the state in terms of taxes. And I think that's partly because the infrastructure was built to support a population of 50,000. And in reality now they're less than 10,000. Colebrook, which is pretty much one town over from us, has about 2 or 3 times the taxes that we do in Pittsburgh, and that's because the school in Colebrook is much bigger and more funded, etc. So a lot of it depends on the towns that have the bigger schools. So Columbia, which is one town south of Colebrook, has very low taxes because they don't have any schools. Same for like Milan, Errol. If the towns don't have schools, the taxes, especially the property taxes are significantly less. But it really varies like crazy from town to town.
And speaking about schools, we had chatted a little bit before we actually started broadcasting. But as far as the schools go, you said something earlier that was very interesting to me about the size of a graduating class of the towns. So
yeah.
Yeah,
So the Pittsburgh school is about 50 kids right now, K through 12. So it's a very small school. And I think the graduating class this year was like 6 kids, and their faces were plastered all over Pittsburgh. So it's a very small school, but much more like, personalized. And then also the teachers up in Pittsburgh are a little different than I think the rest of the North Country, in that they're teachers who have been at that school for like 30 years, 40 years. One of the teachers who we're actually friends with is 75 years old, to give you a sense of like, the demographic of teachers at the Pittsburgh school. They are much older. They're not all 75, but they're all kind of have been there for a long time. And the class sizes are much smaller. But if you go down to Colebrook, so there's Stewartstown and Clarksville between Pittsburgh and Colebrook, but Stewartstown and Clarksville are really, really small towns. And they have like, I don't know, maybe like, I know that Clarksville has a school, but it's like 8 kids total, K through 12. So it's an even smaller school. And then if you go to Colebrook, there's actually like a bigger school. And when I say bigger, I mean like 20 kids in their graduating class versus 6. And so it's a slightly bigger school. They're much more well funded. And so, you know, they have teachers coming from kind of different parts of the North Country to the Colebrook school as well. But something that you know, my husband and I have noticed is anywhere south of Pittsburgh, you do have a little bit more of the woke ideology in the schools, even as far up north as Colebrook. So that's something that's been a consideration for us as well.
And I'm sure there's quite a bit of homeschooling up there because of issues like that, and the fact that you may not want, you know, to take advantage of a system like that. So.
Yeah. There are tons of homeschoolers. I would say the majority of people up here homeschool. So, you know, the school sizes are not reflective of how many kids there are up here. So yeah, there are a lot of homeschoolers, different types of homeschooling communities. So there's a homeschooling community within the Free State group. I know there's a church just about 20 minutes from us that actually has their own homeschooling community. And they have like 20 kids, and they do this little like micro schooling thing where parents kind of get together and teach different subjects. And then there are pockets of homeschoolers throughout the state. So yeah.
So there's options. You're saying there's
lots of options.
A lot of options.
Lots of options. Yeah.
And then as far as jobs and industry in the area, what if you don't mind me asking more personal questions, what do you guys do or what field are you guys in?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually run a marketing and communications agency, a small agency, and I work fully remotely. So does my husband. That's kind of what allowed us to actually move up this far, because neither of us are in the types of jobs that are available up here or in those types of industries. My husband is a mental health counselor, and with COVID, you know, people just got a lot more used to doing that over Zoom and things like that. So both our jobs are fully remote. We work from home. And so that has allowed us to move up here. But there is industry up here. There's tons of construction up here. There's a lot of demand for folks doing things like, you know, electrical, plumbing, fire, like fireplaces, sorry, gas, like all those kinds of things, AC, all those kinds of things kind of up here. And then also there's quite a bit of tourism up here in terms of like ATVing and snowmobiling. And so if you're somebody who's like very well versed with trails, or you want to set up like a little country store or something, those are things that tend to do really well up here. So
you had
definitely
mentioned something earlier in one of our conversations that was one of your big concerns moving up to that area was that there would only be one electrician available to even come out, and he might not be able to come out for, you know, several months because of work. So yeah, really, if there are people who are interested,
there's a demand.
Yes. There's a demand for any service industry jobs or you know, skilled labor or anything along those lines. So yeah.
And then, you know, of course, if you work remotely, the question that we always get is there good internet up here? We immediately went with Starlink because that's the only reliable option if you're this far up north.
How has the performance been so far?
Starlink is awesome. We haven't had any issues. We had a -50 with wind chill snowstorm during the winter, and Starlink didn't go out. Everything else went out, but Starlink didn't go out. So We still had internet.
That's
Um,
great. That's great.
so yeah, Starlink is it has been very reliable. If you do work remotely and need internet up here.
That's great. So, as far as resources and tips that we would have for anybody who's considering looking into the North Country, first off, I would say reach out to people who live up there. Again, there's a group of North Country porcupines who you can find through the FSP. There's a Facebook group, I believe, and you can always talk to us from Porcupine Real Estate, or Chris Lopez is a relocation person, relocation expert who works with the FSP, who can get you in touch with the right people. We have resources, mover guides, and like attractions for each of the regions of New Hampshire on our website. You do need to log in and request them. So if you are interested in those things, please reach out to me directly. My email address is listed, or will be in the comments on this when it goes on to YouTube. And yeah, as far as tips go, again, do your research. Make sure that that kind of living is the kind of living that you're looking for. Again, you're not going to be near a movie theater or a Target.
There's a small movie theater in Lancaster. It's, there are like 2 or 3 movies playing at any one time.
Oh, that's great. I mean, I like that kind of theater.
It's a little like community theater, but it's cute. I enjoy it.
Yes. So again, it's not for everybody, but it is for quite a few people. And I think the people who move up there are going to share a lot of those similar interests and know what they're getting into.
Yeah, and we're always happy to chat with folks, both me and Drew, my husband. Happy to chat with folks if you're considering moving up here and have any additional questions or anything. Feel free to reach out to us directly too. We're happy to talk.
And if we have some time, we can ask if there are any questions from the people who are here. I think your audio, if either of you guys who are watching have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. If not, we will say thank you. Okay. Well, we'll stop it there. And again, if anybody has any further questions or they'd like to ask any other things that we didn't cover during this, feel free to reach out to us. And again, thank you very much, Shauna and Drew. And it's great talking with you guys. Oh, wait, hold on. We do have one in the chat. Oh, just says thanks. Thank you guys. It's always a pleasure seeing you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great night.